Hello there. How are you? Good morning. I'm Jonathan Bowles. I'm the executive director of the Center for an Urban Future. And I've got to say that it's been a little while since I've been out to CSI, and it's so great to be here. It's so great to be here in the fall and see just the real beauty of this campus. We're doing this five-borough forum series on expanding access to tech careers, and we've really made it a point to try to have these events on Staten Island campuses. And I love CUNY. I love all of CUNY, but this campus really stands out, and it is such a treat for Staten Island. Um, Anyway, it's great to have you all here. I appreciate it. I know there's a bunch of folks that are tuning in on the live stream, so welcome to all of you as well. Say a few words about the Center for an Urban Future and also about today's event. In case you don't know about the Center for an Urban Future, first let me say we've done a couple of reports entirely focused on Staten Island, which I'm really proud of. One of them, which was a little while ago, but was really kind of a visioning report about Staten Island's future. It was done in 2009 with the title Staten Island 2020. But if you get a chance, check it out, because I think actually a lot of the things that we actually recommended for the borough's future really ended up coming to fruition. So we were really proud of it. But we really, over the years, the Center for an Urban Future, we're a five-borough focused think tank that's focused on our city and building a stronger and more equitable economy in New York and expanding economic opportunity for all New Yorkers. And we've really made it a point in every report to make sure that there's a focus on Staten Island in every borough. And I see Laura Jean Waters out there, and I want to also kind of tease another report that we're kind of very much in the middle of right now that I'm also excited about. That's going to be a report called 50 Ideas for a Stronger and More Equitable Staten Island. And it will be a report that is featuring a single idea from 50 different Staten Islanders with their own kind of idea and vision for kind of creating a better borough. So stay tuned for that. I'm excited. I did want to say a little bit about why we're here in this particular forum series. We know that creating a more equitable economy is going to require a number of new policies and investments. But few things are going to be more important than ensuring that a lot more New Yorkers from all backgrounds are able to access the well-paying jobs that are growing here. And more than ever, that means accessing technology jobs. So my colleagues and I at CUF have published a number of different research reports detailing specific ways that city leaders can help expand access to tech careers. We published studies about the need to scale up tech training programs that work, the opportunity to better harness CUNY as a launch pad into tech careers, the potential to expand tech apprenticeships, and most recently, the importance of exposing a lot more young people in our public schools to technology concepts. But we know so much more work remains, so much more needs to be done, both citywide and right here on Staten Island. So to shine a light on this opportunity and exactly what's needed, CUF has partnered with Amazon to convene forums in all five boroughs to discuss what actions are most needed to close the opportunity gap for tech careers. We're so excited to have this, our second forum in the Five Borough series, right here on Staten Island. And before we move on, I just wanted to give a really big thank you to everybody at Amazon, Carly and Mike, and the absolutely huge team of folks at Amazon here on Staten Island for their partnership, for their support, and for all they're doing in the community and for this city. They are such important job creators, but they're really doing a lot of great work, especially in kind of partnership with CUNY to make sure that a lot more of our grads and our students at CUNY are able to get on the path to tech careers, which I think is really what this is about today. And so You know, before we get to our next speaker, I also want to thank CSI for hosting us today. What a great institution. We're really pleased to be here. And I'd like to thank a number of community organizations here on Staten Island and citywide that partnered with us on today's event, including Staten Island Chamber of Commerce, nonprofit Staten Island, the JCC of Staten Island, Staten Island Foundation, United Activities Unlimited, New York City Employment and Training Coalition, Build NYC, New York Public Library, Makerspace NYC, and Perscolas. I know there's a lot more that have been so helpful and that are so instrumental to this borough, but we've really appreciated the partnership from those organizations. And now I'd like to, I'm really delighted to introduce our next speaker, someone who is not only quite familiar with this borough, but with probably this building, at least this campus at the College of Staten Island, the Senior Operations Manager at Amazon's Robotics Fulfillment Center here in Staten Island, Mike Sanacola. Please join me in welcoming Mike.
Thank you, Jonathan. And yes, I've been on this stage once or twice, but good morning. Like Jonathan said, my name is Mike Sanacola. I am the Senior Operations Manager at the Fulfillment Center up the block, which is the professional way to say I get all of your packages on time. But I am excited to be here for a multitude of reasons. Number one, I went to school here. I'm a proud graduate of CSI. I'm a fifth generation Staten Islander. We go way back to the 1800s. And I'm so proud of the work that Amazon does right here in my backyard. So as some of you already know, Amazon has been laser focused on helping New Yorkers access well-paying tech jobs. We often say Amazon has a job for every New Yorker. In the last 10 years, Amazon has created more jobs than any other company in the United States. But we're intent on doing even more here, especially through partnerships with CUNY and other workforce development organizations. At the College of Staten Island, we are prepaying tuition for our hourly employees to further their careers in the industry of their choosing through a program called Career Choice. At my site alone, over 100 associates have earned an associate's degree or better in the past year alone, which I think is $500,000. I forgot the number, but it's an amazing amount of scholarship money that we're pumping in to CUNY and our workforce development. But earlier this year, Amazon Web Services launched a partnership with 3 CUNY colleges to integrate AWS Cloud Services curriculum into key programs of study. AWS and its employer partners work directly with CUNY faculty to prepare students for cloud roles like technical account managers, solutions architects, and quality assurance engineers. And these are all careers that are tech roles in demand right now with AWS and other employers as well. And upon completion of this work, we facilitate on-campus recruiting events to obviously drive enrollment into the firms. Additionally, in September, we opened a long-awaited CUNY classroom in the lobby of Amazon's newest corporate office, which is the former Lord & Taylor building. CUNY students will have the opportunity to learn in our building and alongside our tech leadership. The partnership is the first for CUNY with a major employer, as the first for Amazon with globally an academic institution, and we're doing it right here in New York. I will close by saying thank you for the City of Urban Future for kickstarting this, and also thank you all for enriching Staten Island, a place that I am proud to call home. So next we'll welcome our panel of speakers and we'll kickstart. Thank you.
Good morning.
Morning.
I think they're ready. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
All right. We're so thrilled to be here today at the College of Staten Island, and it's my absolute pleasure to introduce our one-on-one fireside chat. I'm here with Abby Jo Siegel. I'm Eli Dvorkin, the Editorial and Policy Director at the Center for an Urban Future. And Abby Jo Siegel is the Executive Director of the Mayor's Office of Talent and Workforce Development, where she executes the city's vision for an economy in which all residents are positioned for career success. Previously, she was the founding CEO of Here to Here, a Bronx-based organization helping New York City students achieve career success goals. And she was the executive director of the James and Judith K. Diamond Foundation as well. Hey, Abby, great to see you. Thanks for joining me on Staten Island today.
Thrilled to be here. Beautiful day.
So I wanted to start a little bit by asking about the big picture vision for New York City's talent infrastructure. And we want to focus on tech. I mean, we're here because in part, the tech sector has added more middle and high wage jobs than any other part of the city's economy over the past 3 years since the pandemic. Over the past 15 years, it's added jobs every single year going back at least a couple of decades now. It powered the city's economy through the pandemic in many respects and actually has more jobs now in New York City than it did in 2019. All of this has led to a lot of opportunity for New York City residents, but there's also some big challenges there. I mean, we look out at the landscape of tech employment in New York City, and while we see that in many ways New York City has a more diverse tech sector than any other big tech hub in the country, we still have a long way to go before the tech sector resembles the diversity of New York City. So I wanted to ask you, just as a starting point, tell us about the city's strategy when it comes to expanding access to tech careers. What is the city doing now to make sure that a lot more New Yorkers can benefit from these jobs and Staten Islanders can benefit from these jobs in the years to come?
Thanks, Eli. You definitely captured it. I mean, the question is, here we are, and I don't know that 15 years ago, anyone could have confidently said that New York City would be the number 2 tech hub in the country, trying very much to be number 1. So watch out, West Coast. Never bet against New York City. But you're right. It's absolutely a challenge that the tech industry, despite its growth, despite being more diverse than tech industry anywhere else in the country, doesn't fully reflect the New York demographic or the New York workforce. And so really trying to figure out what are those strategies. And I think, CUF has done a great job inventorying some of those. The College of Staten Island has been an incredible partner with one of the city's programs that was featured in your recent report, the CUNY 2X Tech, which has done an incredible job of really positioning CUNY students for tech careers, doubling the number of students who are graduating with computer science degrees and getting jobs at an average salary of $94,000. So we're going to double down on that strategy and strategies like that. And thank you, College of Staten Island, for all that you've done to help really develop that program, really think through the different components of it that need to happen so that we can expand it to more campuses, to reach more students across the system overall for CUNY. And so look out for an announcement in the near future about that. It was in the mayor's State of the City speech in winter, but more news to come on that in the near future.
That's great. Abby, really excited to hear. I want to ask you about something else that the mayor has announced this year. A major new push to expand youth apprenticeships. And actually, I think when we first met,
it's all apprenticeship.
All apprenticeships.
Both youth apprentice and apprenticeship.
All apprenticeships across the board. 30,000 new apprenticeships over the next decade. And I wanted to ask you a little bit about this because I think when we first met, you were at Here to Here, and you were building youth apprenticeship programs in the Bronx. Certainly, this doesn't only apply to youth. I think what we saw at the Center for an Urban Future, and listen, Staten Islanders know so well, is that apprenticeship has been an incredibly important pathway into the middle class for decades. But here in Staten Island, like in the city as a whole, for the most part, over many, many years, these pathways have largely been concentrated in the building trades, where we've had apprenticeships for decades. And we haven't seen, to a large or even a small extent, anything close to the same scale of pathways, apprenticeship pathways into the tech sector. That started to change just in the past few years. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about that part of this plan. I mean, we've seen the mayor's announcement. Your team is obviously working on executing this, a bold goal that goes way beyond where the city was even just a couple of years ago in terms of supporting apprenticeship pathways. And I think crucially into sectors like tech, where so many of the good jobs are growing. We recommended the creation of an NYC Apprenticeship Accelerator a couple of years ago, and that's happening right now, which is really exciting to see. So I wanted to ask you a little bit more about what does the future of tech apprenticeship look like in New York City, and what's the city doing to actually get there?
So thank you. I just want to step back a little bit and talk about why the focus on apprenticeship and why we're really focusing on apprenticeship, not, as I say, not your grandfather's apprenticeship, but your daughter's, and really thinking about how do we have apprenticeships for all of the entry-level occupations that power New York City. So really thinking about it across sector and across occupation, because fundamentally braiding earning and learning is a much more efficient way to structure talent development, to structure an economy. And also what works better, not just for job seekers, but for employers as well, if we can get the infrastructure right. And it's going to take some time to shift. That's why I'm super excited the mayor gave us a moonshot goal of 30,000 apprentices by 2030, because it's bold enough so it can't just be business as usual. We all really need to think differently about how to achieve that goal. And when I say we all, it means employers need to think differently, educational institutions need to think differently, and government policy needs to think differently. And so really trying to figure out how to do that is the goal of the apprenticeship accelerator, but it also highlights what is so sort of true for workforce development in general. Is we can't do it alone. There's not like a single institution. It really has to be a collaboration, and apprenticeship is sort of the gold standard for that. And so when we looked at where we think there's potential growth for apprenticeship, we certainly think there's a lot in terms of the trades, both in terms of with the infrastructure bill and the green economy, that there's going to be more opportunity for traditional apprenticeships, and really making sure that those continue to grow in their diversity and number of women in those apprenticeships to really reflect the city's demographic. We also think there's a huge opportunity in healthcare apprenticeships. So it's a big industry. It hasn't traditionally had apprenticeship here in New York City, or at least registered apprenticeship here in New York City. But in other places in the country it has. And obviously it's a big sector, and a lot of best practices really on the job learning when it comes to healthcare. So there's real opportunity there. And then the other big place is tech. And so I think one of the things that we're seeing as we did an inventory on apprenticeship, sort of a baseline study of where apprenticeship stands in New York City, and Accenture did the report with us. And it really looked at where are we, and it did two things. One is it established a baseline sort of threshold criteria for apprenticeships, so sort of the bare minimum for what you would call an apprenticeship. We did that for two reasons. One, to really differentiate between apprenticeship and internship, because they're not the same, and often get confused. And then second, so we could have sort of an entry point coming in, recognizing that not everybody day one wanted to register their apprenticeship. And then we highlighted what best practice was, which is registerable or registered apprenticeship. And obviously we want as many folks as possible to get to best practice. So what we're seeing, and we're seeing this to some degree in the tech field too, is there's actually a fair amount of apprenticeship that meets the threshold criteria happening. It's just not called that. And so we're really trying to suss out where that's happening in various fields, including the tech field. And so that's where we think there's a huge amount of opportunity to really grow. And we're sort of thinking about the tech field as having two types of apprenticeships. Sort of some of the positions where you need to have some CS background, so such as software developers, and then others such as UX designers, where you don't necessarily need the computer science background. And I would say the other thing that we're looking at in apprenticeship in general, and not just tech, but definitely in tech, is working really closely with not only industry, which obviously has to be very much at the table for apprenticeships since we're hiring people as apprentices, but also very much looking towards CUNY and higher education institutions to make sure apprentices are also getting degree credit towards a degree as part of their apprenticeship. And we really think that's a huge opportunity, not just for the job seekers, but also for the educational institutions to really build their enrollment, a bit like we just heard before from Amazon, where you have the employers supporting the tuition and making sure that workers are getting the skills that they need and credentials that enable them to do a whole lot more than maybe the particular job they're in.
That's really helpful, Abby. I guess I wanted to dig into that a little bit more, in part because you had this experience building a brand new program focused on apprenticeship, bringing a model from Colorado, which had been doing it for longer, which was inspired by Switzerland, who had been doing it even longer, but making it work for New York. And I guess I wanted to ask you maybe two questions here. One is, what, if anything, is unique to building apprenticeship programs here in New York City that maybe is different? Hey, Colorado's done something like this. Switzerland's been doing it for decades. But what's unique about the conditions in New York that we need to consider? And building on that, you built a program like this, from the nonprofit side. What, if anything, do you see as the role of government in helping to keep this going? Given all that you laid out about the role of employers, of training organizations, of higher ed, but where does government fit in?
So let me take that. And so government fits in multiple places. But before I get to that, I think developing a youth apprenticeship program was really responding to some of what we were hearing on the ground. What we were hearing overall, and the organization was here to hear, and it was very focused on student career success. So really looking at in-school youth, both at New York City public schools as well as at CUNY, and really saying, if we're really focused on student career success, and that is the outcome, the end goal, what do all the adults in the room need to do differently? So what do employers need to do differently in terms of their hiring practices? What do educational institutions, both at the post-secondary and K-12, need to do differently so that students are really positioned to launch into a career by the time they're 25, let's say? And so we looked at a lot of different places and said, where are some models that are working or doing this differently? And what can we learn from them? Recognizing, as you pointed out, Eli, that whenever you adapt something to a particular place, and particularly when you adapt something to New York City, it's always different. It's never going to be the same. But when we looked around in various places, the model that was most inspiring and most adaptable, I would say, was the Swiss youth apprenticeship system. And I will say the reason for that is, and this is a bit of a story, is, in the, I don't know if it was maybe the 80s, the OECD sort of dinged the US and dinged Switzerland, both for not having enough university graduates that they would need for their economy. And so the US really embarked on the College for All strategy, which, I'm someone who, particularly here in New York City, believes everyone should get a degree, given the barbell economy. It's just how you get the degree should really be easier to do and recognize all the learning that happens in the workplace. But Switzerland, because they have 450 years of apprenticeship, said, I don't know that we want to just go straight to having everyone just go get university degree. Because we really believe strongly in practical learning, and they really sort of separate theoretical learning and practical learning. The theoretical learning is sort of academic, practical is hands-on apprenticeship. So what they did is they modernized their apprenticeship system. So 70% of their young people go at age 15 into apprenticeship, and they're anywhere from 2 to 4 years. And then, because they've modernized it, because we're like, a 15-year-old shouldn't have to decide what they want to do at 15 and sort of be stuck doing that. And they agree. And so they spent a lot of time making sure that it was permeable and there was no dead ends. So a young person who finished an apprenticeship is just as likely, well, it's just like has the opportunity to become a university professor. They made it very permeable. And now the most sought after folks in the C-suite for employers are folks who did apprenticeship and then went back to school and got a degree. And they made that easy, and they created a system where they're sort of continuously improving. So that's where we need to get to when it comes to youth apprenticeship. We have a huge way to go because we don't have 450 years of apprenticeship. We don't have that sort of culture in the workplace to bring people in. But what is abundantly clear from all the studies, and the reason the focus of Youth Apprentice, is unless we get young people into the workplace in work-based learning experiences, such as apprenticeship or intensive internships or even project-based learning, we can't say you're not ready for work if we don't let you into the workplace. And so the more that we can braid earning and learning and have that happen, the more prepared our young people are for work, and the more they're trained in the way that employers want. And we see less of a skills gap, and certainly less of what I would call sort of the professional skills gap, not really understanding what it needs to be in the workplace. And what I would say when we compare New York City compared to other places that are trying to do apprenticeship, we have so many assets to build off of. We have an incredibly diverse economy of multiple different kinds of employers, different sizes and scales. We don't run into the transportation issues in the same way as they do, for instance, in Colorado. Young people can get to the workplace. And I'm just super proud, and this gets back to our government. So a nonprofit can only sort of put up an idea. It's government that can scale. And so when the mayor came into office and Chancellor Banks at New York City Public Schools came in, they got together and, instead of having 100 or 200 youth apprentices, said we're going to have 3,000 youth apprentices. And what's so exciting about that is it's not just the apprenticeship itself, it's what it means in terms of how the high school experience is designed so that it really supports young people in not just doing the apprenticeship, but actually what needs to happen in 9th and 10th grade so they can make the decision to do the apprenticeship in junior year. Similarly, it helps to spur some of the changes, particularly at community college, to figure out how can we support these apprentices and support the employers as they're finishing up the apprenticeship. So that's what government can do.
That's really helpful. I think it's important just to note, and really so much credit to the mayor on this, that the city's previous goal around apprenticeships, youth and adult for across the whole city, was about 500. So to go to a goal of 30,000, it's a big deal. It's a big jump, and I'm excited to see the progress there. But let me ask you then a little bit more about CUNY, because you started to talk about the power of this institution, not just CSI, but the whole system. And we published a whole report just about harnessing CUNY as a launch pad into tech careers. We see so much promise. I mean, as you mentioned at the beginning, Abby, we know that there's now twice as many students earning technology degrees at CUNY than there were just 10 years ago. And crucially, we see pathways for CUNY students into tech roles outside the tech sector and to a certain extent in the tech sector, but there's still a long way to go. I mean, we did an analysis of CUNY students with computer science degrees and found that only about half are working in their field a year after graduation, and that's not where CUNY wants to be. There's a lot of challenges there. We know that when you go to a career fair on most CUNY campuses, including CSI, here you might see Amazon, but maybe not any other tech employers. Unfortunately, that same pattern holds true at other campuses. You just don't see those employers there on campus. And of course, a lot of students don't see themselves pursuing those careers because they may not have friends, relatives, neighbors who work in the tech sector who can help to kind of demystify that path. So there's a lot of challenges there, but there's some good news as well. You alluded to it, and we've written about it. The power of the CUNY 2X Tech initiative, it's really working. It's not just one program, but a set of programs at the campus level that have really helped move the needle on access to paid internships and to tech careers after graduation. It's working. So I wanted to ask you a little bit more about what else is needed now. What can the city do to harness the power of CSI and other CUNY schools to strengthen that launch pad into tech careers?
Yeah, I mean, I think we can do things like expand CUNY 2X, which we're planning to do, and really support CUNY in general and in its inclusive economies initiative, and really recognize how much CUNY has increasingly played a vital role in really connecting to industry. It's something that CUNY's been much more intentional about, and so supporting that effort. So that's something the city does is supports both the through CUNY Central or sometimes directly to, probably more often directly to the colleges, support those kind of industry partnerships and connections. So that's something we should do, and we should continue to do. We have also, one of the reasons we've been able to make these bold statements about apprenticeship is because we've seen increasing organization by industry around really focusing on positioning CUNY students for careers in industry. So I don't know that we could have made that announcement, but for the New York Jobs CEO Council and their commitment to apprenticeship overall and the apprenticeship network. So continuing to use our bully pulpit, our convening power, our inspiration to really bring employers to the table, and really make the case for how unbelievable the New York City talent is and what a benefit it is to their companies, and the fact that we have such strong partnerships to do that. Similarly, activating the smaller and local businesses. I see Linda and the Chamber of Commerce here, like really making sure we're making those connections, because while the big companies are super important, influencers do hire a fair amount. We know that most of the hiring happens with the smaller and medium-sized businesses, so that's absolutely critical. And I think when we look at the tech field and we look at the tech sector, that's where a lot of the tech jobs are. So really making sure those pipelines continue to be strong. So those are some of the things that we can do. So, investment, connecting the dots, herding the cats, and using our convening power to really help position New York City residents for success, but also making sure employers know where to tap the talent they need. So as employers come to New York City, making sure we're connecting them to these industry associations, and also to CUNY. And then I just want to do a shout out, having our tech talent pipeline, our industry partnership that's sort of laser focused on doing this work is super important. So continuing to fund that work and making sure they're marshaling public and private resources towards a goal and towards really positioning New Yorkers for success.
That's great. Thank you. And I want to ask you a little bit about the nonprofit workforce sector. I see, I think Greg's here in the room. I wanted to ask this in part because there's a lot of working age adults here on Staten Island that see these opportunities out there, feel like they're so inaccessible. We're looking for opportunities to train for careers, career changers, folks that see the opportunity to potentially build new skills that can open up some of these pathways. And that may not run through a apprenticeship program or CUNY necessarily. Folks want something shorter that's going to be a more direct pathway to upward economic mobility. But we're fortunate in New York City, we have organizations that are doing exactly that. I would say in general, we see that those organizations are serving no more than a few dozen to a few hundred people a year. And there's thousands that could benefit from those sorts of programs. There's some examples of where we've seen those programs come to Staten Island. Perscola, so we'll talk about this in the next panel, has a satellite location now at the North Shore JCC, and that's actually training Staten Islanders who said, when Perscola was exploring this opportunity, the big barrier for us is transportation. You mentioned earlier, it's like, hey, it's not like Colorado where you're, an hour drive from a job. But for folks to say, getting to a training program in Brooklyn or the Bronx, that's totally prohibitive for me. So that's an exciting development, but that's still at the scale of, a few dozen people being able to access that kind of training. So my question here is, we see the assets that we have as a city. We've got workforce organizations that are seeing real success in helping folks without connections in the industry or previous job experience, or in some cases, college credentials, to be able to train for those sorts of careers. But it's happening at a small scale, and relatively little is happening here on Staten Island. So what do you see as the role of government in scaling up what's working in the workforce ecosystem? And what would you like to see happen next to be able to build on those successes and help more Staten Islanders access those kinds of training opportunities that are really working?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's super excited that folks like Perscola are doing satellite and really trying to expand their reach. But it's true, it's hard to scale those programs without sort of partnership with public institutions such as CUNY or public schools. So I think one is making sure, particularly for tech careers, that there's really an introduction to what they are about and some of the core skills in the public schools, because everyone has access to, particularly to public schools. So really thinking about that. So some of the work that the city's been doing on that is super important. I think the other thing that I want to highlight is this administration fought very hard and passed community hiring legislation in the legislature in June. So that should be signed soon. And just so folks know, community hiring legislation enables the city to use its purchasing power to require hiring locally. So that helps. That means we're using government to create demand generation. And yes, while that will be focused on, it will include the trades and construction, it also includes service contracts. So there'll be some tech demand that comes from that too. So that's another place where we can really help to drive demand. So I think that's another piece. I think additionally, as investment happens by the city throughout the borough of Staten Island, really thinking about that in the context of what kind of jobs is that going to generate, and making sure we're leveraging those opportunities to build some of these pathways into tech careers and other careers that provide economic mobility.
Well, thanks, Abby. On that optimistic note, I think it's all the time we have for this first panel. So thank you so much for joining me today. I hope our audience can join me in a round of applause, and we'll get right into the second panel.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks,
Really appreciate it.
And just saying hello also to everyone tuned in online. It's great to have you with us as well. I know we've got about several dozen people tuned in live. With the second panelist, please come and join me on the stage. And we'll get right into the second panel. I guess this is the moment when I should be doing my juggling routine, or a tight 5 minutes of stand-up or something, but you'll have to bear with me. Let me slide down so I can see everybody. You're perfect right here. Come on down. Can you hear me in this? Yep. All right, everyone. Is the audience still with us? How's everybody doing out there? Interesting first discussion? All right, great. Let's get into it. Thank you all so much for joining me for this conversation today. I'm going to take a moment to introduce everybody, and then we'll get right into the discussion. And I'll start just to my left with Andrew Greenfield. Andrew is the principal of Port Richmond High School, go Raiders. During his time, he helped lead the school to its highest graduation rates in 15 years and added Staten Island's first 9 through 14 P-Tech program. Absolutely. Worth a round of applause. Which is an innovative 6-year high school program preparing students for college and careers in STEM. Hey, Andrew, great to have you with us.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for making the long voyage to join us here today. To his left is Sabine Salandi. Sabine is the program manager for the Tech Talent Pipeline at the College of Staten Island, where she works directly with faculty and tech employers to bridge the gap between academia and industry. Welcome, Sabine. Great to have you here as well. Tilt my chair slightly so I can see everybody. To her left, absolutely, you can hold a round of applause for let's introduce all the panelists, but they certainly deserve it. To her left is Christy Breccia. Christy is an academic career advisor. That's a hybrid academic and career advisor for the computer science department right here at CSI. As part of the CUNY 2X Tech program, she has more than 25 years of experience in higher education as a trusted advisor and academic counselor. We're really thrilled to have you with us today, Christy. Thanks so much. To Christy's left, is Linda Barron, who is the president and CEO of the Staten Island Chamber of Commerce, which she has led since 2004. Under her leadership, the Chamber works to support the more than 14,000 businesses located across the island while investing in youth development, workforce development, and job training. Hey, Linda, great to have you as well. To her left is Kenya George. Hey, Kenya. Kenya serves as the program director with Build NYC, a national nonprofit that helps bring entrepreneurial education into public school classrooms, including right here on Staten Island. Prior to Build, Kenya spent over a decade with University Settlement, where she led youth and young adult programs as well. Welcome, Kenya. Great to have you. And last but certainly not least, we have Scott Van Kampen, who is the co-founder and executive director of Staten Island Makerspace, with over 48,000 square feet of fabrication and studio space at 3 locations on Staten Island and in Brooklyn. And I was saying earlier, one of the great examples of an innovation from Staten Island that was so cool that Brooklyn said, you got to bring it here, which I think was pretty exciting. Scott has been a maker for over 30 years, and you can actually see his architectural metalwork all over New York City. Welcome. Great to have all of you here today. So I think we established a lot of why we're here today just in that first panel, talking about the incredible opportunities that have grown in the city's high-flying tech sector. But I wanted to ask a little bit more about what really brings us here today, which is, have Staten Islanders benefited from this tech jobs boom? Do you see Staten Islanders gaining ground in the economy by entering into the tech sector today? And let me just ask this one question for everybody as we get the ball rolling. What do you see as needed right now to help a lot more Staten Islanders access tech careers? And I'll open this one up to everybody. Don't interrupt each other.
I think more resources are needed here on Staten Island, as we heard before. There are a lot of things happening in a lot of places throughout the city, and we don't see that many things happen on Staten Island. There needs to be more investment in our local schools and our CTE programs so that they actually can be connected to real life experience, have the training equipment that is needed so that when they get to the workforce, they can actually work on the things that they need to work on. I think technology, P-Tech that came here is phenomenal, but we need to do more things like that, more things like for scholars. We just need, and we also need capacity. We need resources so that the local community-based organizations and the schools can execute.
Thanks. If anybody else wants to jump in, I'm also just curious for folks' perspective on how it feels to be a Staten Island, maybe a young person today growing up, seeing these jobs growing, maybe feeling like they're inaccessible.
So I'm a lifelong Staten Islander for the most part, born in Brooklyn, raised in Staten Island. And I think one of the problems that we face in Staten Island is the jobs aren't actually here. I think it's great that Amazon is here now on Staten Island, but I think that the tech field has always been off Staten Island. And you were talking about transportation earlier. And for a Staten Island kid, getting to one of the other boroughs, it's a challenge. And I think that either we need to bring, more tech businesses to Staten Island, or we have to have, better transportation system and cheaper transportation system to get kids off of Staten Island into these tech jobs.
Thanks, Andrew. Christy.
I agree. When you were talking about Amazon, you said it was in the Lord and Taylor building. Where is That's about an hour and 40 minutes. So I immediately thought, could we borrow an Amazon Prime van and drive CSI students there? And I'll do it. Anytime there's an event, I'm able to get students to attend. I could speak from the students' voice as well. So many of my students that are coming into CSI are not exposed to tech careers at all in high school or in middle school. So the first time that they're hearing about it is at CSI. So it's important if they're coming earlier, they're aware about these opportunities much earlier. And the opportunities are valid. I know some students tell me that they did take AP computer science in high school, but sometimes it's the gym teacher teaching it. The students who really like tech fly in that school, but a student who may have been able to be exposed may lose interest in it and go to a different major.
So I would say, so I was actually at the first event in the Bronx that this was held. And one of the things that really struck me was this conversation around just one, access, but then also I think it's important to acknowledge from the high school perspective that if you're in a CTE track, which we work with high school, Ralph McKee, all students are in a CTE track. One of the things that's really important is that there's so many different industries that are really grounded in tech. And like, what does that mean for a young person as you're talking about marketing, as you're talking about engineering, that young people are really clear on the intersections between like, hey, you know that is tech, right? Do you know that is like, and just really making that explicit. And I think that sometimes we just assume that young people know, especially because everything is so digitized and they know so much about technology, but oftentimes they're not really making that world to work connection. And so as educators, I think it's our responsibility to ensure that when we are exposing young people to their interests and we see that spark, that we're making sure that they understand that nice transition into tech in ways that I don't think is as explicit in education, right? So if you're in a CTE track, and it's like you're specifically focusing on this one area, but not necessarily talking about the different careers that are connected to it. And I think that is a nice, an easy way to kind of get them excited, inspired, right? Curious. And then like finding those moments of curiosity and how you hone that, I think is also equally as important. And finding intentional spaces where we're honing that, like, and making those connections, I think a lot of young people will benefit from it.
Thanks, Tina. I mean, you are one of those intentional spaces, but maybe help us understand. I mean, how is it that young people are interacting with the makerspace? Why is that so important for opening up these pathways?
Well, so we're really that practical learning space, right? And at the community nonprofit workshop with about $1.5 million worth of tools right now, on focusing on that advanced manufacturing sector, we offer training in that. We work closely with the city doing an apprenticeship program. We also work with a group like the Doe Fund, another nonprofit, helping guys get welding certifications and finding new careers. But you mentioned, just sort of jump back to the transportation thing. That is one of the biggest, I think, hassles for Staten Islanders as a whole, is getting that access. And the benefit that we have where we're at on the North Shore is we're right next to the train. And so anybody from Staten Island that's along the train line can get to us fairly easily. And in that practical learning space, we see kids who are not necessarily college bound, traditional college bound, really shine, and sort of like we did this group with third graders. It was outdoor build. We were making benches. I make them carry all the wood. I make them do all the manual labor. I cut the chop saw. I use the chop saw with them. But at lunch, we sat down with them. The kids were working really hard, really diligent. I had a couple kids kind of messing around and that sort of thing. And I asked the teacher, I said, how are we doing? She goes, it's amazing. My worst students are your best performers. And that's what it's about, right? And those kids understand, we're still building the world. We still need people. And yeah, we include the tech and manufacturing. We have CNC machining, we have routing, we have to have that tech. We have to have ways to keep track of our orders. So we incorporate that tech in manufacturing and, in making as a whole, right? We support a lot of artists. We have many artists that are working in the 3D realm, utilizing 3D printing and CNC embroidery and all this sort of tech stuff. And it's not just, sitting at a computer all day. right? From my perspective, from our perspective, it's hands-on using tech to build the world.
Yeah, that's really powerful. Oh, Scott, go ahead, speak. Yeah, please.
I just wanted to say that the internship program, the Tech Talent Pipeline Residency Internship Program, we get our students internships, and this has happened largely during the pandemic when students was not able to go into an office work, and remote work has become really a great way for students to access jobs and tech careers. And to the extent in which industries are willing to be flexible about how students, come into work or when they work or how they work is really, I think, important for Staten Islanders who don't have access to that transportation to access those jobs.
Yeah, it's funny. I wasn't quite anticipating how much transportation was going to come up throughout the first, half an hour of this conversation. But I think that's a crucial point. Let me build on that a little bit because I want to ask you more about that program. If folks are unfamiliar in the room, we're talking about the Tech Talent Pipeline Residency Internship Program, which helps support paid internships at CUNY in tech fields. And I want to ask you a little bit about, I've seen some of the data, and we published a report very recently on the power of, this is one of the programs supported by the CUNY 2X Tech Initiative, and with city dollars to actually support the internship. And what I've seen from the data is just incredibly impressive. In general at CUNY, only about 10 or so % of students report ever having a paid internship. At CSI, it was better. But among students, pursuing computer science degrees at CSI, before benefiting from the residency internship program, about a third of students, I think, had an internship. Since then, in 2022, I believe the latest figure was over 50%. That's a big jump in 2 years. And we've seen similar jumps, I think a doubling of the number of students who've actually gone on to land a tech job after graduation. So help me understand a little bit more. What is it that's working about the programs under the TTP umbrella here at CSI? What do we need to know about what's working, and how do we keep it going?
I mean, I think it's partnerships, right? I mean, I think at CSI, at the Tech Talent Pipeline Residency at CSI, we work together and we partner. So what I mean by that is, we've had a lot of success getting underrepresented students who are resident tech jobs into our program. And the way we do that is we partner with other programs where those students are the majority. So programs like C-STEP, for instance, we'll partner with them and ask them to recruit their students into our program. We work with faculty and faculty advisors in the computer science department and ask them to target Black and brown and women into the program. As a result, for example, we've seen that Black students application rates into our program are higher than any other demographic group at the school, and women's application rates are similar to those of men. The other thing that I think is important is that, we are focused, while we do tech training and we do professional development, we are focused on that leading specifically to internships and full-time jobs. And so to finish our program, you have to get an internship. And 95% of our students who complete the boot camp do get internships. And the reason for that is our partnership with employers, right? Employers partner with us and they give us feedback on our students' performance and what they want to see from the candidates that they hire. And we take that learning and we integrate it into the curriculum in the boot camp, into our professional development training, so that we're filling those skill gaps. And so students are more prepared for internships positions in those companies. And of course, I mean, as your report pointed out, that students who do internships are 3 times more likely to get jobs. And so we know that, employers they value internships. And so the type of internships that we make sure that they're project-based internships, that students are working on projects that they can use their coding skills and be able to talk to those skills.
Thanks, Sabine. Yeah, Kristen, we're working with similar students.
What I also think is important is what CUNY 2X did, specifically my position, is I provide academic and career advisement at the same time. So initially I had 150 students and I was meeting with basically juniors and seniors. And this started during COVID. Actually, I started the day COVID closed everything down. That was my first day in 2020. So I was telling juniors and seniors what they needed to have to get an internship. And I would say 95% were shocked that they didn't do anything yet that was supposed to prepare them for a life of work. So I immediately started to figure out what they didn't know and created a program where the minute they step their foot in on campus, a computer science student is aware of what they need to do to develop each semester academically and career-wise to get an internship. I'm more interested not only in an internship, though that's incredibly important, is ensuring that the student is aware of what career readiness skills they need to have and how they can develop them all 4 years. A form of advisement that I do is I provide behavioral interview prep while I'm advising a student for classes. So if a student comes in to sit down, they're going to ask me, what classes do I have to take? I immediately say, just tell me a little bit about yourself. And they stare. Eventually they say, oh, my name is, and I say, okay, what year are you in? I'm a junior. And what are you studying? And then they say computer science. So they're learning their elevator pitch each time they meet me for academic advisement. We take it a step further where our faculty are now incorporating that as a class assignment because many employers are asking students to submit small videos of themselves answering questions. We took that a step further, and the OIT department has a program called Ovation, where a student can practice group project presentations or behavioral interview prep in a virtual environment. So a student can touch that every single semester from freshman year to senior year. Then they go on to the TTP or CUNY Tech Prep or CodePath or some other programs that we have partnerships with, and then they really understand their role, their strengths, and then they're able to go on and get a really quality position when they graduate.
That's incredibly encouraging. I mean, Sabine and Christy, to hear about the impact of those programs. And I guess I wanted to just stay on this for a minute and ask you both, what do we need to do to keep this going? If we're going to see this not only continue at CSI, but grow in the years ahead, what do you need to get there?
Support.
Yeah, we need, of course, the continued funding and resources. The city's been, working with, who started this program, provides us with the funding and the resources, but also networking opportunities more with businesses, with employers who are looking for technical candidates to fill their roles. We just need, the students need more exposure to those people, those professionals, so they can, practice their networking skills, learn how to, navigate those spaces confidently.
I think we need more employers just to reach out to CUNY. The New York Jobs Council has provided that opportunity. Lauren Anderson at CUNY has provided that. Our students are still not targeted schools. So we're going against schools who are targeted. I recently was at Bank of America, S&P, Ernst & Young, and they're all telling me how wonderful our students are, but they don't come to our job fairs. They are not reaching out to Sabine immediately with a quality program. So I don't know what we have to do, what more we can do to let employers know that our students are quality, they're fantastic, and they're prepared. They're getting jobs. A lot of our students are getting jobs out of New York, a lot in North Carolina. I'd rather have them stay in New York. But we can't do that because New York employers aren't coming to us.
And I just want to second that. It really does. So we've done 6 apprenticeship programs in partnership with SBS, and that sort of, we're sort of in the middle, right? We've got our city partner, and then we have the employer partners, and we really need their feedback. We need them to be a part of it. Because I meet these employers, they're like, we need help. I'm like, great, but you have to participate. You have to meet with them. You have to tell them what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong. We've got to have that continuous conversation. And, I reach out because, our apprentices are hired before our hands-on training starts. So they're vetted, we do a boot camp, and then we present them to employers who then hire them sort of based on the potential that they have and the interest that they have. And then we do our training over the next 10, 12 weeks. And it's a lot of feedback, but it's really, those employers have to be present. They can't just say, oh, we need qualified help. Help us train those people correctly and be a part of that training process. And that's where apprenticeships, I think, really sort of can shine, right? And we're filling the gap because many employers can't just do an apprenticeship in-house, right? They're trying to produce their product. They don't necessarily have the skills or the workforce that can offer that training. So we're getting that foundational training in, and then they spend another 10 months on the job once they know the basics with their mentor in the field. And I think that can apply towards traditional, more tech sector jobs as well, and that give them the foundation through a college degree or whatever. But the hands-on apprenticeship part is so important to, just getting people to even understand. Look, you got to show up on time. You got to be there when meeting starts at 9. You got to be there at 9, not 9:15 with a coffee and a bagel in your hand, right? Unless you're bringing coffee and bagels for everybody, but.
Well, you're bringing up a lot of important points. I think one of them is the role of employer-facing intermediaries in building stronger partnerships. And it's something where, CUNY, at the scale of CUNY, can be a huge challenge. And I wanted to say this in part, I think the points you're making are incredibly valid, but, we hear a lot from employers about how difficult CUNY is to navigate and that they don't know where to begin. There's 25 colleges and 18 kind of primary colleges, and they feel like they need relationships everywhere. They're kind of nowhere, and this is not to take away from the key role of employers in actually building this more equitable talent pipeline that we're talking about, absolutely. But it can be hard. And so, Linda, I'm trying to put you on the spot, kind of representing all employers in New York City on this one. But I did want to ask you about this, because you talk, I'm sure, every day with your member companies, folks here on the island who I imagine do express some challenges or frustrations with navigating, whether it's workforce development programs or CUNY or other things. What's one or two things that you hear from companies that might help make it easier to navigate these systems? What is it that government maybe could do, or the other organizations could do, to make it easier for employers to connect?
I think on Staten Island, as Andrew alluded to, there's not a lot of large businesses, right? So I think the problem that we have here is that the small businesses don't know how to access the resources. They don't know that they can get an intern from one of the programs, one of the community-based organizations out here, or for the College of Staten Island, or maybe they know, but they don't know how to access it. They don't know how to go about it. So that's a role that we play at the Chamber. We try to make sure that smaller employers know where these things exist. There is no one portal where all of that exists for Staten Island. So to find out, even for the schools, what specific programs the schools are running and how kids get interested in those particular programs. But, I think when Andrew said before about larger employers not having a presence here, especially in the tech sector, that's huge. I mean, Prescolas came out here during COVID, right? Because they thought, well, maybe we can, with technology and everything, maybe we can provide some courses online initially for Staten Island. And that's how that started. Amazon stepped up and they supported that. The borough president's office got involved. So I think that for us, opportunities, it's very hard for a small business too to manage somebody. So if you have somebody that's coming in, maybe they have a computer science background, if they're coming into that business, smaller businesses need people who know what they're doing already. So it's hard for them to manage somebody to come on board and actually teach them the skill set. So I think having larger businesses doing pilot programs out here, they can be recruiting, but there should be opportunity for local jobs as well. And what we see is a lot of our employers, they'll take entry level, but they use headhunters. They use recruitment agencies to go out to find that mid-level person that they need for that specific skill set. Again, we have a handful of very good tech companies out here, but if they have between 5 and 20 employees, that's a lot, and there's only a handful of them. So tech exists in all small businesses, whether it's as you mentioned before, threaded through just about everything, whether it's healthcare, whether it's marketing, or whatever the case may be. But employers also need that capacity. They need somebody like Scott who can go in and side by side help them develop the skills that are going to support that small business. Because the small businesses here, most of them are under 5 employees, 10 employees here on Staten Island.
That's helpful, Linda. Thank you. And so I want to move back. I think Andrew can see it, kind of nodding, and feel free to just jump in. I got a question I want to ask as well.
Yeah. So I find myself thinking, I've been working with high school age students for 31 years. And if you ask the average high school student what they want to do when they graduate high school, they don't know. They know most of them want to go to college, but they don't know what they want to pursue in college. And I realized that every year, every high school in Staten Island does a college fair in their school, where we have 50, 60, 70 colleges come to the school and try and recruit students. But what we don't do are career fairs on Staten Island, where kids are introduced to all of the different job opportunities that might be out there throughout New York City, so that then when they decide to go to college, they know what they want to pursue. I always joke, I have 3 degrees from the College of Staten Island, from 3 different campuses, and I changed my major 4 times in college because I didn't have a clue what I wanted to do. And I think that kids just don't realize how many opportunities are out there and how many different, professions are out there. They know what they see on TV, they know what they hear about on social media, but I don't think they realize just how many fields are out there available to them.
Yeah, I love that idea. And we've actually kind of recommended something similar about career fairs, where the goal isn't necessarily immediately entering a career, but to really expand career exploration as early as middle school. But I want to ask you one more question here, just building off of that point. And this is something that's come up when we talk about what Sabine talked about, the students who she has to recruit to kind of get into the Technology Pipeline Residency Internship Program. And, we know as diverse as CUNY is, and it reflects, this borough in New York City in really every way, when you look at the students that end up pursuing computer science degrees, you still see some of the same lack of representation that you see in the industry, with 3/4 of tech jobs are held by men in New York City, for instance, and only about 20% of those roles are held by Black or Hispanic workers. Even though they make up almost 45% of the workforce. Looking at your school, you have an incredibly diverse student body. But I wanted to ask you, it seems so clear that you need to be introduced to computing and technology much earlier than college in order to strengthen that kind of pathway into the program that Sabine's running. To get there maybe starts way beyond earlier than high school. So I want to ask you a little bit about what's working in high school to help students that are underrepresented in computing to gain an interest in it, see themselves belonging in it. And even earlier, what do you think your colleagues need to be doing in middle schools or earlier so that when students get to you, they've already felt like they can belong in computing?
I'm going to go a little backwards because I didn't get a chance to describe what the P-Tech program is in Port Richmond, and I realize probably most of the people here don't know what the P-Tech program is. I've been principal at Port Richmond for 5 years, and when I first became principal, I didn't know what P-Tech was. The P-Tech program in New York City is a early college initiative in partnership with CUNY. That's a grade 9 through 14 program. So when I was first approached about the P-Tech program, it took me about 5 minutes of research to realize I wanted Port Richmond to be a P-Tech program on Staten Island. There's less than a dozen P-Tech high schools throughout New York City, and we're the only one on Staten Island. When they first started to talk to me about P-Tech, and the opportunity is that students take 4 years of high school and they take accelerated courses in high school because they start to take college classes their junior year of high school. And at the end of grade 14, they actually walk away with an associate's degree free of charge from the College of Staten Island. And it's just an absolutely amazing opportunity. But when the superintendent first approached me about this opportunity, the first thing I thought was, I don't want this to be another honors program at Port Richmond High School. I wanted students with disabilities, students of color, all students to have access to a program like this. And that's what I'm most proud about this program. You talked about me raising Port Richmond's graduation rates, and it wasn't me, it was my team. We've done a great job of raising the graduation rate at Port Richmond. Currently, we have an 85% graduation rate. 15 years ago, we were at under a 70% graduation rate, 4-year graduation rate. But what I'm most proud about is our P-Tech program, which a third of our students in our P-Tech program have an IEP and are classified as students with disabilities. We have English language learners in our P-Tech program, and our first cohort is now in their 12th grade. So they're about to get their 4-year degree from high school. And because of this program, we are going to have 100% 4-year graduation rate for the students in our P-Tech program. And I realized that, we're introducing students to skills and programs that they never had an opportunity to take part in before. So our students that are in our P-Tech program, they can follow 2 tracks. It's a computer science track and a health science track. And in addition to taking the college classes, they actually start taking college classes before their freshman year as a bridge program on the campus. Those of you who drove onto this campus today, if you're not from Staten Island, you feel like you're upstate. It's absolutely a beautiful campus. And the average student from Mariners Harbor, from Port Richmond, has never stepped foot on this campus until they start the P-Tech program. Our students take high school courses, they take college courses, and then embedded also into the P-Tech program are job internships, which I think is so important. We have 2 business partners right now in our P-Tech program. We're partnered with Northwell Health And I think that when we first thought about Northwell Health as a partnership, I was actually against the partnership because I kept saying, this isn't a medical field program. This is a computer science driven program and a technology program, until I realized in talking to the people from Northwell is how many of the jobs in that sector deal with technology. And our newest partner is now New York Power Authority as a second partner. So our kids are going to get, job skills, hands-on training. And, my ideal dream is that at the end of the 14th grade, when they get their associate's degree, that they either go out into the tech field and get a job or matriculate into a 4-year degree, hopefully here at the College of Staten Island.
Yeah, that's really powerful, Andrew, and I think a testament to the power of that model and that graduation rate is really something to be so proud of. So let me circle back in a minute on kind of thinking about before your students get to high school. Actually, Kenya, I wanted to bring you in because we're talking about high school right now. You're working at McKee. I don't know if there's a McKee Port Richmond rivalry I should know about. Maybe I should have been prepped on that, but I want to ask you about your experience there. In part because I think the model that Build has is unique in New York City in a lot of ways. And it's so connected in my mind to accessing pathways into the tech sector, which is entrepreneurial education early in high school. Not just because I think most of those students at McKee necessarily are going to go on to start their own businesses, create tech startups, many may, right? But because those entrepreneurial skills are so essential for being able to envision yourself pursuing these kinds of pathways. And frankly, it's what a lot of employers are looking for. So I wanted to ask you more about, I think this may be kind of a relatively new idea to folks in this room, that, we have a program, a nonprofit that's helping embed entrepreneurial education in our public schools. So help us understand what that looks like and why you see that as so important for building these pathways into careers.
Thank you for the question, and I think that is the question. And so I think one of the benefits of bringing entrepreneurship education into high schools is there's a few things. One of the questions that we are constantly thinking about at Build is how do we ensure that young people, by the time they graduate high school, really have internalized this idea that they can be the CEOs, the drivers, the creators of their own lives, that we are equipping students with the experiences, the frameworks, the network, the opportunities to ensure that they have really seen themselves as the CEOs of their own lives, which is our mission. And so we do that in a few ways. One, we root and ground our curriculum in the design thinking process. And so a part of that, what's interestingly enough, is that there's a lot of parallels between the design thinking process and a lot of engineering, processes, right? And so one of the things that we really try to get young people to understand is how do you go from problem to solution, and how do you build products, ideas rooted and grounded in those issues that you're identifying in the community, issues that you are identifying in a particular client, and then what are the steps you need to take in order to get there. So there's a lot of work-based learning experiences that students have just based off of that process alone. So students are learning how to work in 9th grade, 10th grade, which is a beautiful process, right, of learning how to problem solve, learning how to sit uncomfortably in really difficult issues, right, and working collectively and collaboratively to move them into their pitch presentations, learning how to talk about themselves, learning how to talk about their businesses, learning how to prepare decks and presentations for judges we oftentimes bring from the world of work to listen to students pitch their business ideas. And so I think what's really critical about just bringing entrepreneurship education into classrooms is, one, really getting young people to understand that your creativity is marketable, right? That your innovation and your ability to just think outside the box and find a solution that is your own can create a pathway for your own life, right? And so when we talk about equity, when we talk about access, anyone can be an entrepreneur. And I think that is something that we really try to instill in our young people by the time they graduate. And then we also intentionally bring mentors into the classroom to support young people in their ideation process, right? And so one of the things that I always talk to kids about is that your first idea is never your best idea. And if your first idea is not challenged, how do you know that it's your best idea? So just constantly pushing young people to really drive their creativity and their innovation, and then making it marketable, learning how to pitch it, learning how to sell it. And so I think when we talk about and a lot of my fellow like panelists here, how do we get young people prepared for the world of work, right? A part of that is being really comfortable with talking about your ideas without guilt, without like shame or fear, right? A part of that is also getting young people comfortable and thinking about how do I take my idea and now present it? How do I identify my cost of goods? How do I figure out who my competitors are, right? How do I conduct the consumer research? And so a lot of what we do is we really prepare our teachers to really have young people's ideas at the center of the classroom, and they're creating, right? And so I think that that is one of my favorite parts of my job, right? And really thinking about who are the right partners. We're taking young people outside the classroom so that they're doing these pitch competitions and competing with students across New York City. There is nothing like that. That is the transformational education that changes a student, right? And it changes their mindset. Because once you do that, they walk a little different. Like every time that I see a ninth grader and they go through the few years of build, like you can feel the difference in their confidence in different classes when they're doing pitch presentations or they're asked to present for history class, right? You can tell the difference between a student who's been taught how to present, taught how to do a strategic deck, right? Because you're trying to pitch for funding from an investor, right? And so those are the kinds of skills that I think are really important, while also thinking about how we bring in the sector into the classroom so that students are getting that level of exposure that they need.
Thanks, Kenya. I think painted a really beautiful picture of what that program is doing, and it's in one high school now in Staten Island. So obviously there's room to grow.
There's
but-
so much room. That's why I'm from the Bronx. So I was like, I have to be in Staten Island today because we want to be in more schools, because I truly do believe that it changes a student's mind about their possibilities. And so, yes.
So I think we brought up a few things that are really inspiring, bringing P-Tech to Staten Island, a program like Build. I also want to talk a little bit about adult workforce training, Linda, because you've done something similarly ambitious with bringing Brascolas here. So I just wanted to briefly ask you about, how was it that you looked at this landscape, obviously with partners, with the JCC and others, and saw there's a program here at Brascolas that's really working. Folks are going through a 16-week intensive program. They're coming out the other end with jobs that pay, $70,000, $75,000, $80,000 a year. We want that on Staten Island. How did that go? And what would you like to see happen next to begin to sort of expand on that type of model?
So I think that, one of the things you said before is there's small cohorts, right? So maybe there's 12 to 20 participants in those programs. So, and from what I understand from the JCC, they do a very good job marketing the program and getting people into the program. I think some of the things that have to be addressed are, when you're doing the recruitment, if you have an adult learner that wants to participate in that so they can scale up, a lot of times they're working, so that kind of precludes them. So I think there needs to be funds that can support stipends or something to get people through the program. I think we're just learning, it's only a couple of years out that we're doing this program here on Staten Island. We facilitated that. We're not innately involved in that. I think one of the things that I'm focused on at the Staten Island Chamber of Commerce is I have my head of workforce and talent here, Darlene Blanco. She actually gets involved citywide in different groups and things like that, so we can kind of see what's on the ground, what's happening elsewhere, how do we access that. She actually just finished the U.S. Chamber Fellows program to find out what's happening around the country. So I think there's opportunity to find out what's happening elsewhere, bring those programs here, get the, I think, employer engagement issue, which I think, I hear that. I went to a conference, I think the Staten Island Foundation did it 10 years ago, where they talked I was in the room with a bunch of community-based organizations, and they all said, and schools, we need access to the employers, and I think the hard part for the employers is, again, time, right? And the fact that we have a lot of small business. I think that chambers and business organizations are going to act as intermediaries to support some of those, facilitating the connections. I also think there's like an opportunity for chambers to get involved in getting more local data. I think that's something that I'd like to see the mayor's office get more involved in, because when we're looking at jobs and where the gaps are here, some of that information is hard to find. So I think that, a lot of that, but scaling up and trying to get programs here where people can if you don't have a high school degree, how do I access something? Or if I'm an older adult and I've been fired, or I don't want to work in Manhattan anymore, how can I kind of retool myself? And I think, the local colleges have adult programs that people can go into, but it's affordability a lot of times. So I think that precludes some people from getting into those arenas.
Thanks. There's a lot there, a lot of specific ideas as well. So I want to build on that. I mean, talking about solutions, recommendations, where we go from here. And we've got an audience here and tuning in online, including policymakers, staffers, decision makers in government, as well as in philanthropy, and from the tech sector too. And this is really for everybody, but let's talk a little bit about some solutions here when it comes to employer engagement, when it comes to building on what's working here and scaling it up, or when it comes to bringing things from other boroughs that you'd like to see here. And the sky's the limit. I'd love to know from all of you, what are one or two things that you'd like to see government help you do here on Staten Island?
The word I keep hearing everybody say is access. Our youth need access to more programs. Our adults need access to more programs. We need access to more businesses coming to Staten Island. We need access to better transportation. And just the word access is what I've been hearing from everybody on this panel today. And I think that's what we need from the local elected officials.
I would say coalition building, right? I think there is such a value. Like, I would not meet anyone on this panel if I didn't show up today, right? So when we think about just the power of relationships, right? And when you put people in the room that have similar interests and are aligned with the mission of bringing more resources to community, being thoughtful about who holds these coalitions and opportunities to meet so that partnerships can get birthed, right? Excuse me. And so I think that that's an important piece of it that sometimes we don't talk about. It's just how are people coming together? Where's the opportunity for adults to network so that we know what's happening? Because a lot of us are working in silos, right? In our communities, in the trenches, it's really focused on what we're trying to do. But then there's somebody literally right next to me that can really help to expand my student experience, right? And so how do we ensure that we are strategically pulling people together so those relationships can take form?
Right. And I think that responsibility falls a little bit on, the chamber and, as a nonprofit, I try to do my research, but it falls to those employers, again, similar to what I was saying earlier. We have a great program that Connect funds, and it's for STEM learning in our space. And we're not talking career paths, but it's opening kids' eyes to new ways of thinking and new technologies. And if we have these employers that are willing to engage and support kids through the learning process, but then also once they do get into the workforce or as they're expanding their learning, having that paid apprenticeship is key. If they're paid to be there, they're invested. It's not a waste of time, and they see that benefit, and they see their time as value. And I think they've learned. I learned early before work, after work, on my lunch break. I learned wherever I could, but I just see so much value in the fact that these students can be there and be paid and not have to worry about how am I paying rent? Just makes that entry level easier for them, I think.
My dream is that a company would sponsor electives for us in computer science. We don't have a large amount we could offer our students. Technologies change all the time. So I would love Amazon, sorry, I keep picking on Amazon, if they would perhaps do a CUNY-wide elective on cloud computing that every campus could enroll in virtually. You could have 100, 200 students, have software engineers come in and teach courses as electives, teach the values of the companies, teach the skills that each particular company needs, because we're chasing that. So, I went to Bank of America and I had to find out what Bank of America wants our students to have. Amazon, what do our students want to have? Google, and they're all different. So why can't the employers take that over a little bit? Let our faculty teach our ABET accredited courses, let the employers come in and teach some of our electives, and that would just enhance our students.
I just want to build on what my other colleagues have talked about with access to employers. and just say that it would be great to have a central location in CUNY, because you mentioned CUNY is made of different campuses and how accessing each one of them can be difficult. So if there was a central office that dealt with business development and internships, and all of our programs can tap into that central office for so the employers would go to the central office, and then we would then tap into that central office to get our students into those internships. And if the city, it would be great for the city to then, they have all these connections with businesses, of course, right? If they can then let those businesses know about those programs, and have them, meet with us and talk to them about, our students and what they can do for them. Instead of us, so right now we are individually calling businesses to engage them in our students, but it would be nice to have that centralized.
I think government can play a role. I think back of when Makerspace 10 years ago came into existence. New York City EDC facilitated that. They had come to the chamber and they said, we're looking to open a tech incubator on Staten Island. Is there any interest? Or a food incubator? What do you think? And we actually did an info session, and out of that fund Makerspace, and I think they got like $75,000 startup funds to get rolling, and that's how they were initiated. But I haven't seen many things like that coming out of City Hall in the last 10 years, at least, Staten Island specific. Larger employers definitely have a role if we can get them to come here and participate. But I do think that, our role is to try to find out where these things exist. How do you get the resources for them? I mean, even when you look at the state and what they have invested in workforce development, if you look at that consolidated funding application, it's very hard to apply for funds and bring them back to the local community because a lot of our existing programs. So there needs to be opportunity for new programs. I think inspiring the youth at in high school, even before high school, is a role that we have. I have a wonderful group of employers. We have a similar program, the Young Entrepreneurs Academy at the Chamber, where we teach kids how to start their own business. It's a 20-week after-school program. It's open to all kids on Staten Island. We have about 75 local small business employers that get engaged in that program as mentors, as speakers, et cetera. I think employers want to be engaged. I think it's just a matter of facilitating a lot of that and trying to get them to talk to that's how, kind of what you said before. It's all about collaboration. It's who you know and who's in the room and how we get all of these people involved. But I sit here and I think about the old co-op program. I'm like many moons, I'm so old, but what about instituting a co-op program where high school kids can work a week and go to school a week and have that really hands-on experience? And I think that those things turn into, employers hiring people right out of school. So I think we need to facilitate things earlier so that, kids have more opportunity and even if they're being exposed to small employees, they're still being exposed to many facets of the workforce and industries and different things. So they can, at least it gives them an idea, because I don't know how many kids I've interviewed who have no idea what they want to be when they grow up. So we need to kind of work towards that, speaking to the younger generation.
So I wanted to ask, I love those points, Linda. I want to ask Andrew a little bit about that too. And we started, Linda, you're kind of teeing up some conversation again about exploration. It just seemed like such a key thing in all of this. But I wanted to also ask about exposure to computing, and because the city's made such incredible progress through the computer science initiative, which is now in its 8th year, and it has led to the situation we're in today, where 91% of schools in New York City now offer computer science. But the challenge is that, according to the latest data, only about 17% of students actually take computer science. And so, in general, what we're seeing is most schools are offering it, and most students still aren't taking it. And I'm curious if you see similar patterns playing out, for Richmond. One of the key questions here is, when we looked at this as a research organization, we saw so much value in the approach of training teachers to integrate computing into their pedagogy long before high school, so that before you get to middle school, before you're being given options to opt in to computer science, you're embedding computational thinking and digital fluency in the curriculum. And that could be in a history class or a science class, but also just be first grade homeroom. So I want to ask you a little bit about this. Do you see those same disparities taking shape in high school? And what do you think we need to be doing to get upstream of that, to work earlier in the school system to expand access to computing?
Be careful that I don't insult the people that I work for. One of the things that I love about this mayor and this school's chancellor is that they use CTE programs, and they are pushing more and more hands-on type programs throughout schools throughout New York City. I think what's happened to us for a long time is we were so worried about getting kids the required graduation requirements of math, English, science, social studies, world language, and their phys ed requirements that we started to forget the reasons why kids fall in love with school. And those are all of those other programs that kids get involved in, whether it's a culinary arts program, whether it's a TV media program, whether it's a computer science program, whether it's a P-Tech program. And I think we're finally moving back in that direction where we're realizing this is what gets kids excited about school. You know, all the high schools on Staten Island are in competition with each other for recruiting students. And I always joke with families that are looking at Port Richmond, it doesn't matter whether you go to Port Richmond, Susan Wagner, Tottenville, Curtis, McKee. Your child's going to take math, English, science, and social studies. That's a given. It's the school you want to choose is the school that has those other elective programs that are going to excite them. And although we are in competition with McKee, I love McKee. I think they offer great programs, and they offer programs that Port Richmond doesn't offer, and I think that's a good thing. So as far as computer science, you know, we're finally moving back in that direction now. The P-Tech program kind of gave us that jump start to offer a 4-year computer science degree. But what about the student that's not in P-Tech? So we're finally starting to offer those computer elective courses again, where kids can take coding and Python and all block programming and programs. But it's very hard to fit it into a traditional 8-period day that students have. Our P-Tech students take a 9-period high school day, which is longer than the average student takes, because we need to make room for those programs. You know, I was excited for the last 3 years in a row. Port Richmond High School was cited as being a school that offered AP computer science to more students of color and female students than we did to white male students. And I thought that was a great thing. But we're still not where we need to be in offering technology programs to all of the students.
That's helpful. Thank you. So I'm looking at the clock now. I think we should turn this thing over to our audience. I think there's folks here that have some questions and wanted to get involved. So folks can raise their hands if you have questions. We have our colleagues with microphones. They'll come to you. Just let us know your name, your affiliation, and try to keep your question brief so we can get as many folks in the room as possible. But if folks want to jump in, if you have questions, raise your hands, and our team will come around. And I'll ask some more. All right, let people think about it. So, but seriously, feel free to raise your hands. I'm going to check back with the audience in a couple of minutes. But so yes, another question about. Oh, here we go. Okay, yep, perfect. Thank you.
I'll just start it off. So first, I want to thank CUNY and CSI because they're certainly leading the charge on technology. I did want to mention, you know, there is a program 2 years ago that was launched, the New York City Digital Media Center, and we started off actually with students from McKee High School. So we teach students in 6-week increments, video editing, podcasting, but we do a collaboration with my for-profit clients because I also have a media company. And this is everything from going to Carnegie Hall or to New York Philharmonic, shooting content, interviewing folks. But one of the things that really has positioned us and Staten Island in terms of youth development and workforce development is the pipeline from that on-hands learning into really a transition into applying for a 4-year college. So our students we had our first year of graduates last year, and they completed 100% that are now in 4-year colleges. And this year, we're anticipating the same thing. But a lot of our students are interested in doing tons of tours all over the schools, whether it's CSI or Wagner. And so with the new Innovation Center and the virtual lab that's opening at CSI, we're looking to grow and partner not just with the students, but also with employers and the Chamber of Commerce to really help position them in workforce development. So I just wanted to say thank you to Andrew, because you were one of our pioneers in partnering with us. And we just had our students go live yesterday at Maker Park Radio that's housed as Makerspace. And so these are collaborations. So when we talk about connectivity, collaborations is certainly key in having funders like the Staten Island Foundation that really see and understand the pipeline. And it's not just hey, it's an after-school program, but it's more hey, it's an after-school program, but it's a pipeline into them securing a 4-year college degree. So I just want to say thank you. That's all.
That's great. Thank you. I don't know if you wanted to comment on that as well. But
Well, thank you, Jackie. It's you that's great, not me. But I think that that's what high school students need, are more programs like Jackie's program, where, she comes into the school, she talks about this program. We had, a dozen kids, immediately want to jump at the opportunity to get some real world experience. And a lot of people think that today's youth are apathetic and they don't want to get involved in stuff, but it's not the case. It's 5 o'clock last night. I'm watching our kids, at Make Up Talk Radio, broadcasting, having a great time, after a full day of classes. And I think that's what kids need. They need to see that these opportunities are out there.
That's great. Any other questions from the audience? Comments? There's someone. Yep. Thank you.
Yeah, you all talked about challenges that every time we have a community conversation comes up. Transportation. And this is, multi-generation issue that I don't see any real movement in. Also, the challenges of Staten Island having small businesses rather than big employers, and that lack of connection between training programs and education and employers has also been, multi decades. But I wonder, when Christy, when you were talking about talking to employers and saying, I've got quality candidates and you're going to these target schools, it really struck a chord with me, because I think you posed the question, but I'm not sure that you got any answers from the folks you were posing the question to. So I'd like to turn that back to you, Eli, and Center for an Urban Future. Is there something like about the way the rest of the world perceives Staten Island that may be a challenge that we all need to take some other tactics, strategies to overcome?
Like I said, I will defer to a couple of my colleagues who are at work and actually get their students in jobs every day. Certainly, I'm happy to kind of speak after the event about this as well. But I'm really curious because you all are actually setting your students up for career success. Tell us a little more about that experience and maybe where do we need to push or help or support to be able to strengthen those connections?
Well, I like to say our students are getting their positions. I don't get anybody an internship or a job. The way the students are prepared from the moment they step on campus is enabling them to get the positions. So our students are getting jobs. I mean, our numbers have doubled in almost every area since CUNY 2X started. When I'm talking about employers, like, I went to S&P last Friday. There was an Amazon interactive jam that our students participated in, where they just work on problem solving. And, we had 10. There was Princeton, NYU, and a school in Maryland. And when I was speaking to the coordinator, I said, who's your target school? And it wasn't CUNY at all, or CSI. And they do have programs where they're looking to, get into CUNY. But I'm an academic advisor who happens to know careers, and I've been able to incorporate it. And now I'm also working with recruiters and employers. So, my role is very strange. And if there was a way that the employers came to us as SCB and actually had a great idea where there was like a central area, it would just be much easier. It's a lot of work for us. Our students are getting the jobs. Our students are referring friends to get jobs. So that's a huge goal. We have a great alumni, but we're not a target school. And it's been an issue that's been for a long, long time. And I know that our Dean of Science and Technology here, I know he's working on changing that as well. So we are a target school for companies to come. And Sabine can speak as well as on her internship program.
Yeah, I would say, I'm going to be honest, I think there is a bias. I think they don't see all schools as the same. And I think one way, like I mentioned, to overcome that is a central location where it'll be more equitable, right? If the businesses have a central location, and that central location decides which students to funnel into that business. I think it's just a more equitable solution than each school doing their own business development, trying to convince, like, why am I competing with Brooklyn or schools to hire my students when if it had a central location, they would decide that, and it would be more.
If I could just add too, I think a problem with CUNY students, and when I go to these employers, is they're all telling me about their stories. Like, maybe they have children, or they have to work 4 jobs, or they come from another country, they have to learn the language, and those are positive traits to me. I mean, what employer wouldn't want a student who navigated another country, made their way through CSI, got a degree, while working 3 jobs? They could solve any problem at work. So the employer has to understand that those are skills that their company needs, not focus on a student who, she came from the Bronx, she had a shaved ice business with her mom, she managed to go to class on time, she managed to pick up all her classes, and they were talking to me about her sad story. It's her story, but she's a success. And CUNY students need to be looked at that way. And I think that's an issue that's a problem with employers, that our students are fantastic.
I really appreciate that. I would just add as well that our research around harnessing CUNY as a launch pad, we certainly identified this problem, not unique at Staten Island, but definitely specific to CUNY. And obviously, when one success story tends to generate more, you see more employers start to see the value when they have somebody inside who's championing CUNY. And we saw in so many cases in many companies, that's one person, one person saying, I'm the only CUNY grad I know here, but I have this sway internally, this ability to look at CUNY a little more closely.
Our students are using LinkedIn for that. So I have them post their successes, and the recruiters are reaching and they're noticing.
Yeah,
so that's one way.
It seems like it really helps.
Yeah.
One of the recommendations we had was around supporting initiatives that help to build alumni networks and cohorts, because there really is so much value in building that social capital, not just as hard skills or even as soft skills. We have some great programs in New York City to do that, but just like workforce training programs we were talking about, we're serving more than a few hundred students a year. Maybe it's much smaller. So there's a piece there. The other thing I was going to add is that CUNY understandably does a fair amount to market itself to students, but we recommended in that report that the city could play a much stronger role in helping market CUNY to employers.
Yes.
The same way that you see in some ways, come to CUNY. It's a powerful, convincing argument. This incredible institution which has a that's affordable, that's accessible, where you can kind of chart a path to your future. But it's understandably entirely aimed at future students, to do something similar to similar scales, across the whole subway system, but even an employer. So just putting that idea out there. Other questions, ideas from the audience? Yes, all the way in the back of the room, and then we'll come to the very final. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Joe with Activities Limited, Director of Workforce Development. So my question is related to tangible certifications and trainings that can be offered. I think that as a nonprofit, we can work with some contractors just provide certifications and training, things that we're not experts in. And looking at the future and the employment landscape today, what are some tangible certification trainings that you think should receive who are in high school or recently out of high school?
So I think as far as certifications go, it's industry based. I'm not totally 100% up on like tech certifications. I think sort of college degrees tend to show that. From my perspective on the manufacturing and fabrication side, to be a full-on certifying apprenticeship, I think we would need to extend our apprenticeship to a couple, maybe 2 to 4 year program, which I think would be amazing. There's not necessarily the funding there for that yet. Our program is fairly intense. We provide a certificate at the end that says, hey, we've met these benchmarks, we've fulfilled this training, the students fulfilled their learning of this thing. That's not really an industry-wide standard. So, we're really kind of a boot camp for fabrication and manufacturing. So I think an industry-wide sort of look at that and a partnership with not only the employers, but also the companies that make the tools. Like Haas has a great certification program for their CNC machining. They make big machines that do lots of robotic tasks, but they machine stuff. And you can go through their program, and we actually have taught that program, and you test it out and you prove your proficiency in it, and then you add that to your resume. This says, hey, I've got this, and I can run this machine, and I have this. I'm certified by this company to operate their equipment. So I think more programming around that side. I think Haas is actually a stellar example of how they give back to the community. They support students, and they work very closely with colleges.
And if there's something that you offer at the high school level, something you've been exploring, certifications or micro-credentials, things like that.
It's funny, we offer one certification program in our school currently. We have a great 4-year culinary sequence in our school. It's a CTE program, and every one of our culinary students walks out with a food handler's license. And I know it doesn't seem like a big deal, but I always talk to kids about it. Whatever you're going to pursue after high school, if you're going to go off to college, you know that with that food handler's license, you can get a part-time job in a restaurant anywhere in New York State. And I just think it's such a simple thing that a kid walks out with that certification, but it can mean the difference between them getting a job when they're in college and when they're not. And I just think that we need more programs like that in the schools, that they would get certifications, but I'm not sure what those certifications should be.
Yeah, I'm just going to add, we can move on to other questions too, but there are some widely accepted industry recognized certifications in tech. AWS for cloud computing, for example, Microsoft Azure, Google offers a bunch. And they're all helpful. I think, look to, especially in tech, look to those who are actually developing a partnership with industry. It's challenging sometimes to go very niche because obviously you want to make sure it's applicable across businesses. But for something like AWS Cloud, it powers so many of the businesses in the country. It's not unique to working at Amazon. I think that's one strategy that's helpful. I will say there's obviously thousands of other certifications that aren't necessarily credentialed through an industry association or company. And I think that landscape is much more challenging to really identify which ones teach really marketable skills without necessarily having that signaling that to an employer. And we're doing research on this right now, so I'm happy to talk more about it. But yeah, so actually we had a question in the front row, and then I'll move to the middle as well, and then right here. Thank you so much. And so you just have a microphone, I'm sorry to interrupt, but just right your way. And just let us know your name and who you're with. If you can, thank you.
Well, my name is Israel Martinez. I am a community liaison with the city council, and I'm curious to find out. I heard Linda speaking about small businesses, their access to CUNY grads. It's unfortunate that CUNY is not a target school system, but I'm wondering if there's what kind of demand there is on small businesses, and if there's a missed opportunity between CUNY and small businesses and chambers of commerce. I don't know. I'm curious.
I mean, I think there's opportunity for more collaboration, absolutely. I do think that it's getting employers to know where to go to, right, to access those community students. That's probably a big piece of it. When it comes to specific programs like CUNY Intern to Employment Program, they actually will come in and work with the chamber to, place about 20 students or something like that. Those programs need to be scaled up because they're very limited. So I think trying to make those connections, there just needs to be more resources, more collaboration to make, because I think they can happen. It's just a matter of they're happening at a very small scale right now.
That's great, thank you. So I saw a question there, I think it's about the 7th row, and then right here in the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th row. Is there another microphone that could come around? That's perfect, yeah.
Hello, my name is Priscilla Marco. I'm with the Staten Island Business Outreach Center, and I wanted to follow up on something that Principal Greenfield said about the culinary students. Staten Island lacks an industrial commercial kitchen, which is a big obstacle. Other boroughs have that. Something we should be asking our elected officials to do is to fund that so that people don't have to travel to another borough to have that space. That's for, let's say, NYCHA residents that want to start a catering business have no commercial kitchen to use in Staten Island to be able to start their business. We would be able to give jobs to the students graduating Port Richmond's culinary program if we had an access to a commercial kitchen right here on Staten Island. So if everybody could make that request of their elected officials, maybe that can happen. Thank you.
Appreciate the comment. Thank you.
We've actually thrown around some ideas on that.
So just a question right here with the scarf. Thank you, ma'am.
You, good afternoon, good morning, excuse me, it's still morning. My name is Nicole Etienne, I'm with Link NYC, and I had a question. You talked about, just looking at the title, access to tech careers, and apart from transportation and the presence of big businesses in Staten Island, what are the other obstacles to entering tech careers in Staten Island, such as, is it language access, is it limited broadband access, and how can these challenges be addressed?
From the high school perspective, I think finding qualified teachers that can teach these technology courses is always a problem. Port Richmond High School had one of the best auto shop, auto repair programs when I first got there 20 years ago. And we had to shut that program down because we couldn't find a qualified instructor to teach that program anymore. McKee still has a great program, Tottenville still has a great program. And I think access, we're pretty fortunate in Port Richmond. We're a school that's always gotten a lot of funding. So for our students that are in our computer programming courses, we actually give every student, a MacBook to keep for the 4 years that they're in high school. But I don't think a lot of schools throughout New York City or even throughout Staten Island can afford to do that. So I think that, it's access to the technology, and I think it's access to qualified instructors in the high school level. It's very hard to hire a computer science teacher if you're only going to offer 2 or 3 computer science classes, because now what is that teacher doing for the rest of the day? It's not like college where we have adjunct professors teaching high school classes. I don't know if that answers your question.
That's great. Any other questions? So I see, now the hands are really coming up. So in the fifth row and then right behind you as well. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Rachel Smolka. I'm here. I have a small business on Staten Island. It's a career consulting service, and I started my small business, which I like to say, my 9 to 5, I work in tech. So currently every day, I actually took off to come to this. I work at a biotech company. I've worked in ad tech. I worked in fintech. I started my small business because in those roles, I would have to frequently hire interns, entry-level people, and what I was seeing is the people that were coming to these interviews were not ready at all for the job or the interview. So I've made it my mission to kind of come here. I've actually, Andrew, you and I have never met, but I've been for the past 3 years volunteering, speaking about jobs, speaking about financial literacy programs. So I just wanted to say that I'm very interested in this. I love hearing about this, and if anyone can help, I do it on a volunteer basis. I love talking to kids about what we actually look for, what we're looking on for from a resume perspective. LinkedIn is a huge tool, which most high school students and a lot of college students, they don't have that right away. LinkedIn is something that it's at this point of time, it's of utmost importance, the same level of a resume. A lot of kids don't have that, and it's free. It's free. And so I just wanted to just leave that comment here that I'm happy to speak to any of these programs just to talk about the things that we're looking for when we go out and hire.
Thanks so much. That's really great. And we have time for one last question right behind you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good morning. Wonderful discussion. My name is Michelle Bascom. I'm the Director of Programs and Development at Nonprofit Staten Island. It's been really a really enjoyable experience to hear these different insights. And I think I've at least heard throughout this morning's discussion the ecosystem largely defined as employers, education institutions, and government policymakers. And so my question on behalf of Nonprofit Staten Island, and especially because we have 2 amazing nonprofits sitting on the stage, giving their insight, and we're hearing from CBOs around the room, JCC hosting First Schoolers, UAU with their workforce division, doing career exploration and internship placement. So what do our panelists see as the role of the nonprofit sector? And kind of where does that intersection of CBO supports, whether it's for career exploration or those internships, where does that really enter, your experience in your mind and the collaborations that you hope to push forward as next steps?
I think the community-based organizations can be extremely helpful in preparedness, right? So, as this young lady just talked about, people come in and they're they're interviewing and they're not ready for it. And I think that we see a lot of the soft skills and things like that. So I think the community-based organizations can be helpful on that end. I also think they can be helpful providing space, for like JCC for the training, and also, kind of working collaboratively in the community to see where those gaps are and where the needs are. And I think the problem for the community-based organizations are capacity. So if they can be funded to bring in outside training programs and house them, that would go a long way with making those connections. But there's definitely a role for community-based organizations. I mean, one of the things that I think, Staten Island we should be proud of is that we do have a really close-knit community here. So once everybody starts talking, there's this lot of collaboration, there's a lot of back and forth, and I think there's opportunity. We know the pockets of our community. I mean, if we're looking for at-risk youth, and we're trying to find how to reach them, the community-based organizations are the one that's going to get us there.
Thanks, Linda. On that note, I want to say thank you so much for amazing panelists. Can you join me in a round of applause for amazing panelists? Thank you all so much. It was a great conversation. We appreciate all the work you're doing. Thank you all so much for coming out today. It's been a pleasure seeing everybody. I'll turn it over to Jonathan.
All right, I'll just add my thanks, and I want to also make a big thank you to Amazon, Mike, Carly. It's been so great to partner with you on this. Thanks to CSI. Thank you all for joining us today. And can I actually get another round of applause for this panel? Thank you. Let me also say just really quickly, I mentioned earlier this report that we're working on with the Staten Island Foundation, about 50 ideas for Staten Island's future, but we also have a couple other reports that are in the works that I thought I would just briefly mention. One is a report looking at how to improve and expand employer engagement at CUNY. It's not focused just on Staten Island, but I'm putting it out there just because it's something we're working on. And if anybody in the room has any thoughts about that, the ideas came up a couple times today, and we know there's a lot of things working at CUNY on employer engagement, but as Eli mentioned, we also know that it can be hard to navigate, and so we're looking at kind of what we can do about that. Also, the ideas around workforce development and workforce training came up, and transportation, and it reminded me that we're working on a report about the importance of wraparound services to improve outcomes for workforce development programs. The idea of kind of making sure people have transportation, maybe childcare, other things to be able to do workforce training programs. If there's folks on Staten Island that have seen those issues and feel like they're important or have any thoughts for us, we'd love to hear from you. So anyway, I'll leave it there, but it was so great to be here, and thank you all for joining us. Have a great day.